Alright, so for this next straight-to-video segment, I wanted to talk about the Lost Boys sequels, I guess. To touch on the original really quick, if you're not new here, you already know this is like one of my favorites in general. Certainly, like one of my favorite vampire movies, and it was one that was just love at first sight. And whether it be the characters or the performances or just Santa Carla in general and the way it's portrayed and how it's basically like a character in itself, and so much time is devoted to just seeing the environment of where they are, and also like production design wise, just like the cave with like the giant Jim Morrison poster that's like candle lit where they hang out, and just everything about this. Kiefer Sutherland's David is an all-time villain. Just everything about this. It was one of those love at first sight movies where I remember where I was when I first saw it, and that feeling of I felt like I was seeing something that would basically be in my life forever. So I can't say enough great things about how classic this one is. So that sets up what we're looking at here. We'll start with The Tribe, the first of the two sequels, and right away, when you think of a long-delayed, Lost Boys sequel that's straight to video or straight to DVD, and we're missing most of the cast members. The only person that's like really, really back is Feldman as Edgar, and going into it, you would think expectations are very, very low. However, it does start off pretty strong. This opening scene is pretty great, where just an immediate sign of, okay, maybe we're in good hands, is that, like, the first person we see is Tom Savini walk out of the house. And it's like, okay, this is a really good start. And then he has this altercation with vampire, who we presume in the moment are probably vampires, given, the whole Lost Boys setup. And then as this argument progresses, we see that it's Savini that's the vampire. And it's like, oh, that's an interesting twist. And then just as we're coming around to that, then it's revealed they're all fucking vampires. And they attack him and kill him. And this is who our, like, core group is. And right away, that's a really strong opening. Especially for, like, this kind of movie, this sort of straight-to-DVD sequel. So that's really promising. And then we enter a new location with Luna Bay, and you can see that they're kind of attempting to do what they did with Santa Carla in the original movie, where we see, like, around the town, and we see the locals. They've even got their own saxophone guy, like the one in the previous movie. And while it does attempt that, and that is appreciated, just right away you can still tell that it doesn't quite have the same life to it. It's like, maybe if the point was that it's a bit more of a dead town or a bit more of a ghost town, that might be one thing. But it's clear they're trying to sort of inject that same sort of life into it, and you just can't. Like, everything surrounding the original movie is so alive. And this just feels very much like the straight-to-DVD version of it. But another problem is the cast of characters, where it's like there's so many people in the original movie where we would kind of see them around in other movies, and these recognizable faces, and they all kind of, even if they were just like a background part, you still remember them they all have like some instance where they stood out, some moment. And then here it is a very wooden cast, a very sort of like the kind of cast that whenever they speak, it's like they're reading off of the script for the first time. It's like they're cold reading at a table read anytime they say a line through the entire movie, beginning, middle, or end. And they even attempted to throw something into the mix here by having the villain be played by Kiefer Sutherland's real life brother, Angus. And even then, it's like there's some sort of charm coming off of him, but for the most part, even he falls victim to that too, where it does seem like it's just these very sort of bland line readings, and nothing really comes off particularly smooth or, like, snappy in any way like the dialogue is in the original movie, and just everybody's sort of sleepwalking through, it feels like. Because it's barely worth mentioning the main characters, the siblings. Because really, once we get into the story, all it really does is feel like a lot of retread and a lot of them trying the same thing over again, where, again, the main characters are two siblings, and one of them is turning, one of them's getting sucked into the world, and the other one is trying to stop them from doing it. And we also get callbacks, like the girl gets impaled on antlers. There's and it's this very sort of shoddy effect where she explodes now, because of course it's like, oh, let's try to go a little bigger while we're doing the same thing, and that's just really not helping. There's even down to the detail of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre reference in regards to somebody's living space, where they talk about it with when they get to Grandma's house and they see all of the taxidermy, and Sam makes a reference that it's like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then the sister makes the exact same comment when they see Edgar's trailer. And it's like, even down to some of the little throwaway lines, it all feels like they're just trying the same thing and hoping that it sticks. And there's also just a lot of references in this one in general. Like, they don't really know what other dialogue of their own they can come up with. So we get, like, there's one character in particular this is, like, mostly his character, where he's making, like, Lebowski references, and there's a Warriors reference, there's a White Heat reference. And it's like, there's so many quotes from the original movie, and there's ones where it's, you know, the crowd you're in, because if you say them, somebody somewhere will know what you're referencing, will know the Lost Boys in some sense, and then it's almost like this brotherhood, like, bond happens. You're just not gonna find that in this one whatsoever. And like I said, the only really returning cast member is Feldman, who is still doing Edgar Frog had that voice he was doing, and I don't know what it is in this one, because I feel like the joke in the original movie is that Edgar Frog is trying to put on, like, a gruff voice to make him sound like he's this seasoned hunter when he's a child. And if that's the case, if that's what they're still sticking to, then it is quite funny that he's still doing the voice. But there's times where I can't quite tell if it's now they want us to accept that that's his actual voice, in which case I'm not on board with that. I much prefer to stick to that's him still, to this day, putting on a voice as an adult. But I don't know. And with Feldman, it's hard to tell. So, and on top of that, there's also, obviously because Feldman is in this, and because he is, you know, synonymous with the Lost Boys in general, there's a random Goonies reference where the aunt wants them to watch the Goonies, and they seem like they haven't. And it's like, it feels like a whole detour. It gets a close-up. The DVD she's rented gets a close-up, and that's just, I don't, it feels like it had no confidence whatsoever in itself to do anything to stand out and be its own thing. Which is a shame, because the world basically lends itself to that. Like, especially with doing the different setting. Like, the fact that they didn't just set it in Santa Clara, that they went to this new place, Luna Bay. And it's like, because you've had a location change now, you can use that as an opening to change other things, and you just don't. So there's that. And as far as Edgar having this vague background, because we know that Sam's not here, and we know that Alan seems to not be here. And when Edgar keeps repeating, like, I know how you feel, I lost family too, it's like, because there seems to be more references to Sam, you think and you know, the real-life relationship with him and Haim, that when he says that, it's weird that you first think of Sam before you would think of Alan, his actual brother. But, yeah, and then they drive that home twice, where he basically, in different contexts, says the exact same line of, I know how you feel, I lost family too. He says it to the same character. He says it to the brother both times, just to drive that home. What they're really doing is driving home that so you can get to the mid-credit scene, and that has some sort of payoff. But you only needed to stick it in there once, and we would have got it. So there's that. If there's one thing that I do actually kind of like that is repeated, is it's when they're on their way to the climax, and Edgar repeats his speech verbatim about being warned about how the vampires go out, and, like, you know, some explode, some implode. That whole thing. I actually like that being his sort of his always prepared speech for going into battle with anybody that's new to it. So that one I feel okay with, but everything else just feels like really lazy and just really lacking in confidence in general. There are moments they add in here that are kind of nice, like seeing how the vampires have fun. That's something they kind of take a bit of a different approach to. I like a couple of moments when one vampire stabs another one, and like because he's immortal and won't die, that's just what they do for fun. It's like a prank. And the fact that he stabs him at this party and his insides start to fall out, and he's just like, he's slightly perturbed while putting them back in. That's really good. That's a way to use the concept in a way we didn't see before. And it's like there's a lot of other stuff there that you could have done, but it does feel appropriately updated. That when you think about what all they were doing in the 80s, where it's like they hung out on the boardwalk and they caused trouble and they did all this other stuff, and it's like in here they're just like hanging out and playing video games. And it's like in 2008, I think 2008 or 2009 when this came out, it's like that makes sense that the vampires would be doing that in their spare time when they're not out causing trouble. And so as far as that goes, there is another thing that they were so confident in they actually put it on the cover of the DVD, which is another thing they do for fun is they go out and they wreak havoc on like motorbikes and shit. And this is something that does feel, I get the idea and I like the idea, but in its execution it is just like over edited noise. And the fact that it feels a bit redundant when we get this scene by itself when they're riding around on bikes causing havoc, and then like a whole other scene later we get this the time to join the club scene in the original movie when they're around a campfire and there's other people there and they feed, and we see this really in a really big way for the first time. This is the first time the brothers really seeing it up close and personal, and it's like this really could have been, if you had to do the bike thing, you probably could have easily combined these scenes, but it does feel like very repetitive how we get these scenes of just them and I get that that's that's partially what we want to see, because the whole concept and the whole vibe is how fun it is for them being these younger people that turned into vampires and now they get to sleep all day and then party on it and do their whole thing. It's literally the tagline of the original movie. But they found a way to make it just feel redundant very quickly. And it's like, you look at that and it's like, you really could have had them wreak havoc on the bikes and then immediately have the campfire scene. And just everything in between is not really necessary. It just feels like you're dragging things out. And that's another thing too, where it's like it's the lack of creative writing is how you get backed into a corner like that. So that's something that just keeps rearing its head as we go through this one. And there's continued like bad editing choices, like higher frame rate when she's first turning, and like the darting around, and that's just lame and cheesy and just has never worked. There was like no situation where that kind of editing was actually used effectively that I can think of. Maybe like once or twice. There's like one or two examples, maybe. But for the most part, it's a big giant neon sign that says we're straight to DVD. And so that's kind of annoying. And talking about, I guess real quick, that campfire scene, and if it has the same impact of the time to join the club scene, it does not. It reminds me of the first time I saw a trailer for this movie on another DVD, and I didn't know what it was when the trailer started, and then it shows the scene when they say, yeah, we're vampires, and then the guy changes and says, no, seriously, we're vampires. And this just looked so ridiculous. I remember laughing, whoever I was watching this with, I remember laughing hysterically at this trailer, and not in the good sense. And then the fact, I think it was the very end of the trailer, was when Edgar says, who ordered the steak? And that's just, and it was a hilarious trailer, but like I said, I feel like in the wrong ways, because I don't know what's up with Edgar and the puns in this. because they quipped a little bit in the original movie, but I don't remember a lot. Like the it's the attack of Eddie Munster is the only one that kind of comes to mind. Sam is the one that says death by stereo. But I don't really remember that, and I've seen the movie like 100 times, and I don't remember Edgar being this like pun machine whenever he kills anything. And this continues through both of these movies, and I don't really know. It's like their attempt to do what little quipping there was in the original movie, but again, and it doesn't even feel like quips in the original movie. It just feels like commentary that happens to be funny. And this is just like he's going straight to puns, and it really doesn't work. And when we get to this climax, there are some fun moments. There's the moment when we've seen it before, but it's still fun. When he's like going after the vampire, and the vampire laughs and says "You missed," and then Edgar like blows his head up. That's fun. That's always going to be a fun joke, but yeah, it all just feels like there. Like I said, there's no. Again, you will notice how little I have mentioned the main characters, the siblings. There is a whole plot here where Angus Sutherland has seduced the sister into this world, and they do that whole thing, and this whole climax is to save her and destroy him because he's the head vampire. And they don't even have, like, the other two movies, the original and The Thirst, both have, like, the twist head vampire. This one doesn't even bother with that. He just is. They just decapitate him, and that's basically the end of the movie. They end on that note when it looks like they're going to redo the Grandpa thing, when it's like, oh, Grandpa knew about vampires the whole time. But it's the aunt, like, thinking they're getting high, even though they're covered in blood. And that's like the one time they tried to subvert something we already knew and what we thought was going to happen, and they just made it so much worse. So either way, whatever they were doing, very little that's in this movie works. So then we get to what's probably the only thing worth talking about with this movie that would get even, like, any fan of the original movie hyped in some way, and it's a bit disappointing because you hear the concept that Sam's a vampire now, and your first instinct is like, well, that sucks because we loved Sam, and we want him to be part of this whole thing. And it's like, if you're going to bring Haim back into it, do something good or something worthwhile or something cool. And I guess I could see the appeal of having Sam as a vampire. Only one problem. It's a mid-credit scene. He and Edgar lunge at each other, and that's the end of that. And so we did, and they completely ruin this before it even happens. They ruin the surprise factor, because when you're watching the credits roll, the last two names, before we've seen the mid-credit scene, the last two names in the credits are Corey Haim as Sam and Jameson Newlander as Alan. And so you're thinking, oh, where were they? And then this scene happens, and it's like, oh, well, I already know what this is building to. And then it's Sam, and they do the whole thing, and then the movie continues on, and it's over. So then you're thinking, it ruins it in two ways. One, it ruins the surprise of Sam, and secondly, it has you waiting for Alan. And Alan's not coming. Because Alan's scenes were deleted. And because there is an alternate ending where Sam shows up and he's not turned. There's two. There's one where he's not turned, and there's one where he's been bit, so he's in the process of it. But both times, he's warning him that Alan is coming for him. And we get one shot where you can barely even tell it's Jameson Newlander, and he's driving around maniacally as a vampire with some girl with him, and they're supposedly coming for Edgar, and that was going to be our sequel bait if that was the ending they went with, which they didn't, which is probably for the better. Despite the fact of what we went with the next movie, and we'll go ahead and talk about The Thirst right now. So, yeah, we deleted that ending, and so you think, oh, good, because that would have been kind of lame to do a Frog Brothers movie that you build up as, oh, the Frog Brothers are finally back together because the other movie was just Edgar. It's like, great, let's see them back together now. And it's like, well, actually, I think we're going to stick with the whole Alan's a vampire thing. And so, if you're willing to give that the benefit of the doubt that it could work somehow, you might think, okay, I can get on board with that. Let's see what they do with it. Oh, you're essentially still writing Alan out of the movie. You're going to put him at the beginning and you're going to put him at the end. It literally says, the Frog Brothers are back for blood. That is the tagline. And you'll notice that Alan's not even on the cover, and that is much more accurate advertising than the tagline. And the whole idea of setting that up. So, yeah, that's something that's already... This absolutely should have been a Frog Brothers Are Back movie. And the ending of the movie... We're jumping way ahead here, but staying on this, the climax shows us that a Frog Brothers movie with one of them as a vampire probably still could have worked a little bit. There were signs that that concept could work, of them working together to fight vampires, even though one of them is one. And that's not what this movie is. So, again, we have another throwaway plot here where I guess they're trying to set up a noir kind of thing, where you have the woman that comes in, and she's got the missing brother who's been taken by vampires, and she talks to him like he's like a private detective or something, and he has to go on the hunt to save the brother. And, again, that noir analogy is accurate also, since it turns out, ultimately, spoilers, she's a femme fatale. So, yeah, as far as not paying off the Sam thing, apparently what happened was Haim was busy and couldn't do this movie, but they were planning on doing a fourth movie with him. But then that's like right around the time that he died, so this is basically the ending of our trilogy here. Now, I don't know what was before or after, but the idea that... Because this idea that they would have done a fourth movie with Haim, but there's a lot in this movie about Sam being dead, and he goes to, like, his grave, and the whole Batman comic thing comes back. So I don't know if that was done, like, after the fact, because if there's one thing this movie does have going for it, it is that... Because it's already kind of bittersweet to think about their real-life, you know, friendship, and then what Edgar and Sam have, which is alluded to in the second movie. And then with this third movie coming out after his death, and it being so focused on the people in Edgar's life that he's lost, mainly Sam and Alan at this point. And so there's a lot of flashbacks and a lot of focus on that. And when we get those moments, there is a real poignancy to it when you think about the fact that it was really... that we had really lost Haim in real life as well. So that gives it some sort of emotional foundation when we're in that territory. But otherwise, it is just another really basic-ass plot with characters that you're not really going to remember. They throw in new characters like Johnny Trash, who is a blogger, and he has some really clumsy scenes here. One in particular, when he's interviewing this DJ, who is the main villain, who for most of the movie is the main villain, and just to show how like clumsily put together this character was, there's two lines in one scene that feel really off. When he's talking on his blog and he's talking about... He addresses the lost boys and girls, which are his viewers. And that seems pretty shoehorned in to throw the title in there. And then right after that, he has a moment where he's interviewing the DJ, and this interview is like 25 seconds long, and basically nothing is said. And genuinely, enthusiastically, when it's over, he says, "Man, that was a great interview." And it's like, I guess they want us to think that there was a lot of dialogue in that scene when there wasn't, so just tack on one of the characters saying how great the dialogue was. So, there's that, I guess. And then there's, like I said, there is the woman who hires him, who is an author of, quote, a shitty vampire book series that glorifies vampires. And which I'm assuming is coming into the whole Twilight thing, and addressing that, and throwing that in, which is kind of fun, I guess. And it actually is an especially nice detail that he says it glorifies vampires, given who it turns out that she is. So that's not bad writing right there. That's some pretty good foreshadowing and clues as to what's actually going on here, while also kind of taking some very low-hanging fruit digs at Twilight. But you can have your cake and eat it too with that. It's fine. There's also the stock, like, supplies, explosives guy, which I imagine is supposed to be a memorable character, but isn't really. It just feels more like in Mystery Men when they go to Tom Waits and they get, like, the non-lethal weapons. That's something, that's actually a thing, and this is the weapons that are lethal to vampires but non-lethal to humans, which is still is another pretty nice idea. There's more ideas in this one, it feels like, and there was more of a let's see what else we can do rather than just falling back on the same old thing. Because you could say it's pretty, lazy to keep falling back on the Sam stuff and showing clips from the original movie, which is something the second movie never did. But again, adding that poignant layer of putting Haim into the movie, regardless, there is something that's kind of a nice emotional payoff to that, especially with this being the send-off movie for this trilogy, essentially. So there's that. There's also Lars von Getz, who is this reality star that's been brought in to sort of join the team here, and we've got a nice little tongue-in-cheek moment where Corey Feldman practically breaks the fourth wall to tell us how staged reality TV is, and we know that the reality TV stage is one that Feldman knows very well. So there's a little bit of self-deprecation in there, which is fine. But so like I said, it feels like there's more going on here where there were more positive directions that we could have gone. I'm not saying that we do, but the seeds are there, like the ideas are there, and that's more than we can say about the previous movie, I think, where it's not just leaning on, previously existing things to get itself by, essentially, just to get itself to the end credits, basically. Because it does, one problem this one really does have is it seems like it desperately wants to be a Blade movie, and that's something that you feel through the whole thing. And it's like, we were just talking about how The Lost Boys is its own vibe so much. And so you don't need to pretend to be another series, another trilogy at that. And there's so many attempted Blade vibes in this that it becomes ridiculous, actually. Even the opening scene, there's the rave and stuff like that, and the action scenes feel like they're trying that. But even just this opening scene where they're dealing with, like, a senator or something feels like a scene out of, it feels like a knockoff scene out of a Blade movie. Even if it's a lesser Blade movie, still a Blade movie. But even then, still, yeah, every now and then we do have moments where we still have to fall back, because we do have, I was just saying how, this one's kind of trying to do its own thing, and this one is only relying on, like, old dialogue and rehashing everything. Yeah, one of the first lines in The Thirst is Alan saying, Alan sees the senator, and he's old, and he says, "Holy shit, it's the attack of Grandpa Monster," which... make of that what you will. It's a very, like, the fact that one of the first lines of the movie is kind of a lazy callback is there are worse callbacks than that, but still being like one of the opening lines, whatever. I guess it's to show that Alan is back in this movie, despite the fact that this is the scene where he turned, and this is just a flashback dream sequence. So whatever Alan we can get, I suppose we have to take with smiles on our faces, at least, because they're not giving us much. But they're also talking about some interesting ideas in this. The plot set up where the thirst is the blood of the head vampire, and the fact that this is a DJ, so he's at a lot of raves, and he's famous for that, and making the blood of the head vampire... making people think that it's a drug that's going around raves, so everybody's taking it and they're building an army. That's a pretty good idea. That's a really good setup. So there's that, and there was the use of the new Aiden cover of Cry Little Sister in the second movie is... it's there, it shows up every now and then, and that's one where it's like, I don't think you can necessarily overuse it, because it is throughout the original movie as well. And so I thought they used it pretty nicely in the second movie, and then here they used it during that skydiving scene. And to be totally honest with you, I feel like that shouldn't work. The whole context of this and this whole scene shouldn't work. But in my opinion, it's actually kind of cool. It actually came out, but it's actually executed well enough. So... I like the fact that the song never loses its luster, even if the movie's quality is changing drastically. So just everything about that song is always going to be... it's always going to hit. So once we get to the other side of all this, and we get to what's basically the entire second half of the movie, which is basically a lot of vampire fighting as we get to this plot of saving Peter, the brother of the author that's hired them. And it does feel like I said, while it's trying to emulate a Blade movie, we do still get, some fun moments in here, like the reality star guy getting his heart punched out. And we get, and this has much better effects than the Tribe did. It's still straight to DVD effects when they sort of, vaporize, but they're much, much better than they were in the Tribe. So it's got that going for it as well. And for the most part, while this fighting is going on, there are a lot of embarrassing attempts at banter and quips. What we were talking about with the puns with Edgar, I still don't know what that is. But every now and then there's a moment that comes through, like when the guy mentions that the reality star got his heart punched out, and Edgar's response is, I'd like to see that footage. And so that's pretty funny, and there is one Edgar pun that does work, and one that I do appreciate. And that's when he breaks a record and stabs a vampire with it and says, "Vinyl still shreds." That one's really good, and that one feels like something Edgar would have said in the original movie. So that one I'm definitely on board with. So, yeah, after that, it's a lot of noise and a lot of vampire kills until we get to the ending, where we reveal, after the fight with the DJ, that the head vampires are actually the sister and the brother who started this whole thing off. And it's not a bad twist. And like I said, it actually, when you look back, you can see ways in which it was set up. So this does have a lot going for it as far as that goes, but still at the same time, it does fall back on when it's nice after the second movie with the sibling bullshit that we have a movie where at least Edgar is at the center of it. But again, you bring Alan back and it's supposed to be this triumphant thing, and while it's supposed to be these big badass moments of the two brothers working together, all you're thinking about is, why the fuck was this not the whole movie? Like, what? Like, it very easy. Just have it all be night scenes, at least. Once again, if you absolutely could not pull yourself away from making Alan a vampire, there was still a way to do it. So, that's... It feels like there's some lost opportunity here as far as being a Frog Brothers movie, but there's a lot more that works in this one than there is in the Tribe, so it does have that going for it. But as we all know, we're always going to come back to the original. We're still going to watch the original 100 more times, and these probably not so much. Maybe like every 5 or 10 years or something, just out of curiosity, because we've forgotten about them, and it's like, what were those like again? Was there anything good about them? Let's take another look. That's going to be why you watch these, probably. Maybe the average person, at least, the average fan. So, that's, I think, how we're going to leave this one. So, we are almost done. We've got one more original versus remake, and then we're going to go through a franchise, and then we'll have one big video on Halloween that we're all partaking in, everybody on the channel. So, we're almost done with all this. So, until the next thing, I think that's it.